Actually, anxiety has only certain basic uses. The ancient peoples and even Oriental nations that are supposed to be very tranquil in their desire attitudes do admit that there are certain basic desires which can be cultivated moderately without afflicting the soul too seriously. One of the basic desires that is commendable is man's desire to be useful, his desire to improve in order that he may be useful. Practically no one who is successful is ever happy unless he is useful. So the motivation behind achievement is not mere accomplishment or prestige or honor or distinction or reward. The real motive is usefulness, that the individual may become a better servant, a better instrument of something. So the desire to be useful is a very constructive one if it impels us to become useful by practical means. But the desire to be useful without the support of skills is one of the heaviest burdens that flesh must bear. For there is no one who can make more trouble or get into more trouble than the individual who wants to help people but does not know how to do anything. Merely follow his advice and you'll be worse off than he is. But if this usefulness, this impulse to help, to serve, to give, to share, impels us to achieve a means of usefulness that is proper and appropriate, then this is a desire, this is an emotion which we may regard as essentially commendable to our way of life. Another emotion that is commendable and proper is a deep emotional instinct to venerate, to seek to see value, the constant searching for the good, the resolution to see it, the sensitivity to recognize it. These emotions are very useful to us. Also the emotion of aspiration, the impulse or desire to become more like truth, to become more godlike, to unfold the best part of ourselves, to strengthen all the attributes of consciousness by means of which we become able to recognize virtue and also become skillful in the cultivation of it in our own conduct. Then, of course, there is the emotion of compassion, the individual attaining with all other insight and skill a certain intimate realization of the inevitable shortcomings of others, a desire to actually take a paternal relationship with life, in which those who do not know so much are no longer enemies or strangers, but children who must be instructed. A desire to save values, to save life, to serve people, to understand principles. Such desires as these are indeed commendable emotions and lead ultimately and instinctively to a sense of participation in the divine creativity of life at the source of our existence. So we do not necessarily say that all emotions are bad. We can only say that bad emotions are bad, but that the power of emotion is a kind of energy, and that this energy, which if used poorly, will make us the champion warriors of the neighborhood, can, if used wisely, give us new insights, new values, and make us perhaps the most companionable and interesting of all people. Much depends upon getting down to work and doing something with it. Getting down to work with a problem always seems to imply an immediate need. So let us assume for a moment that you have a fairly well-developed instinct to be an anxious person. That the problems you see around you cause misgivings. You're not very happy about the way the world is. You're not very certain as to whether or not you are going to survive the normal span of your years, or whether you will be one of those that might be sacrificed to some new atomic project. You are not quite sure what kind of a world you're bringing your children into. You're not too certain how long your business is going to last. You're not very confident about the present state of national or international finance. You're not quite certain whether our way of life is going to survive. We do not know how much or how long these patterns will build, and what the climatic situations will be. Now, there are two kinds of patterns in this world. Those patterns which come within the area of our influence, things we can do something about, and those patterns which belong to areas which are so general or collective or so bound to the greater courses of motions that personally we have very little influence over them. These are the things we cannot do much about. Therefore, intelligence, integrity requires that we change those things which can be changed, and that we learn to live with those that cannot be changed. If we do not make this adjustment, we're in trouble. Now, it's not nice to live in a world that is not the kind of world you particularly like, but you have a lot of company, if that is of any interest to you. Practically every book that we get, the old manuscripts on palm leaves and on papyrus, the ancient inscriptions in clay and stone, the ancient carvings on the sides of hills, all of these bear witness to people of time and place distant to our own, who were not very happy about anything the way it was. There were old whitewashed inscriptions on the walls of Pompeii. It was destroyed in the 1st century A.D. by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. And these inscriptions warned of the political corruption, the terrible difficulties that would attend the election of the wrong man. And they sound exactly like the ones we're writing now. And they were accompanied by the wonderful thought that never before in history, that was the 1st century A.D., had things been going to the dogs as rapidly as then. And things have been going to the dogs since the beginning. But of course the dogs don't want them, so they return them to us. And we have to keep on doing the best we can with them. Now, this period, therefore, of anxiety has to be measured in terms of value. If man as a being was destined to live forever in this particular world in which he now is, if he was created merely to weep over the graves of his own dead, it would be a pretty melancholy picture all around. But man was not created with a complete dependency upon this world. Man was not created merely to be locked forever in the peculiar patterns which arise in society. And here another great benevolence of the universe, which is generally misunderstood, has stepped in to make certain that no patterns could remain forever unbroken. And that mysterious agency is death itself. Death, which is a release and a source of inevitable change. It takes the benefactor, but it also takes the tyrant. And in the presence of these immutable factors, the world has to change. It could not change if man himself was immortal, physically, because he would impose his own thought, his own wisdom, his own foolishness upon things so dogmatically that nothing could change. But as it is, all things move, and out of this motion new patterns are forever being created. And man, looking at the world in its larger way, realizes that there is no moment in history in which this world is not governed by those forces and processes most necessary for its own integration. The world has to be disciplined, just exactly as the individual has to be disciplined. We would all like a spoiled world, but nature will not give it to us. We can try to spoil it, but we can never succeed. Thus, our great anxieties about things about which we can do nothing, or very little, can be resolved only by our own understanding of the reasons for things as they are. And if these reasons are examined honestly, with clarity, and with integrity, our anxieties are usually dispelled. There may be a nostalgic note of sorrow that things have to be this way. There may be a kind of regret that man hasn't seen better and hasn't performed more adequately the tasks of living. But perhaps we will also have this little tendency to exonerate man. We will remember childhood, and that childhood could not be a period of experience, of wisdom and of understanding, of maturity. And yet in childhood man makes mistakes sometimes that he must live with in his adult years. So man perhaps cannot do much better than he is doing. But man cannot fail. He will not be allowed to fail. And the great plan and pattern of things has shown from the beginning that he does not fail. So it is not impossible for us to take a constructive attitude toward that which we cannot change. It is perfectly possible for us to become so discriminating, so thoughtful in our observation of phenomena, that the laws governing it slowly become obvious to us. Then we can sort of relax and take an attitude of greater faith, because these things are moving, and they are in the hands of powers that have moved creation since long before there was even a spark of light in this great midnight sky around us. Man living on one little globe that is hardly more than a fly speck in space, surrounded by an infinite creation. There is really no need for man to sit down sadly on a rock somewhere, a small rock on top of the big one, and there gradually to come into the realization that because something isn't working out the way he expects it should, or the way he would like it to, that the universe is falling into chaos. It is not. The vastness of things makes it almost impossible for man to comprehend the massive pattern of which he is a part. And from this lack of comprehension comes his smallness of faith. But it is perfectly possible for him to return to God, the keeping of those things that belong to God, return to the infinite laws of nature, these patterns which these laws alone can work out, and be only able perhaps to gain the consolation of dimly perceiving the workings of these laws. But his larger hope lies in the fact that corruption has never yet succeeded in winning. And actually it never can. And in the ultimate solution of all problems lies nature's fulfillment, when nature is bringing creation as it would a plant, finally to its own fruitfulness. For the end of all things is that they shall be fruitful. And in the case of the universe, this fruitfulness is yet to come. So in this procedure, we have not so much concern or need for concern. Our emotions do not reach out to universals very successfully. We may read in the newspaper that 10,000 have died in a flood in China, so we just turn the sheet and reach for another piece of toast. We are not able to experience things which are far beyond our daily life. We are not expected to take on the universe. Certainly, we are expected to help. And the moment something goes wrong, we are usually impelled to help. And under normal conditions, the heart of the world would be sending medical supplies and help to those areas where this disaster occurred. Everything we can do, we probably will do. But we cannot go beyond the experience of our own way of life, our own understanding, and our own conviction. Thus, a really healthy anxiety over things of vast size and duration. This is not very possible to us. We can only blindly worry. We cannot actually put the parts together and make anything out of it. So we come back to those things which we can change, usually the patterns in which we are personally or socially involved. And we know that if we are able to change enough of these patterns, that these changes will be felt collectively. If we can improve the living in the American home, the American way of life will be better. The large collectives will be served the only way we know how to serve. The first thing that each individual can do for the common good is to so change himself that he is not detracting from the common good, because he is a unit of it. So he begins to think about those things that can be done. And he generally finds that he can bring more of universal law, universal wisdom, universal understanding into his own conduct, if he so desires. He can find ways in which he can keep the rules a little better. And he will find that as he keeps the rules, the natural causes of his anxiety will diminish. The individual who makes his decisions does not have to worry about them. The individual who has a clear-cut pattern which he is striving to keep finds in this pattern itself the strength for decision. It is the person who does not know what he believes, does not know what he is trying to do, who is always finding someone opposing it. His own weakness is his adversary. And if he is not certain, the patterns of other persons may encroach upon him. If he is going nowhere himself, someone else may try to drive him in their own direction. But if he has his patterns, those who understand will help. Those who do not understand will probably not have the strength to really interfere, because few people have any more strength of interference than they have strength of right character. Some people feel, of course, that an individual who has very little strength to do good has great strength to do evil. Usually this is not true. An individual whose strength of value is not strong makes neither a successful saint nor a successful sinner. He is simply unable to vitalize any attitude sufficiently. The only reason why we can be afflicted by the weak is because we are still weaker. There's no other answer to it. The individual who can bowl us over with 1 pound of energy is proving that we do not have available even 1 pound to resist him with. It is not the idea that somebody else's powers are so great that they are just irresistible. What really happens is that someone else is so persuasive that they finally convince us that we must do what we intended to do in the first place, which isn't always the right thing to do. So people nourishing our weaknesses affect us more than those who attack our strength. It is the individual who is forever ready to compromise his principles who can find an adversary always ready to help him. These patterns bring us into the very simple core of the problem of working with anxiety. First of all, if you find this habit is taking over, you are not able to quite evaluate things, that you are worrying too much about something and probably at the same time giving no thought to that which might be even more important. If the tendency is to the minor key, if you have built your home in the doldrums, if you are constantly and continuously in fear and more or less uncertainty, if things never seem to quite gel, but the general tendency is negative, then there are certain things that you can do. There are a number of things that you should do. First, of course, you don't need to go to an analyst and have an aptitude test. This is a sort of an optimistic term anyway, because most people take the test to find out not their aptitude, but how few they have. And this problem very often solves itself by merely quietly sitting down and being honest with yourself for 5 minutes. This little honesty, such a little program of honesty is most therapeutic. And decide that there are certain fears or anxieties which are really contrary to what you yourself believe. You know you shouldn't have them, but you do. And you know there are certain people that you shouldn't take the attitudes to that you do, but you have those attitudes. And you also have a realization in yourself that most people are doing the best they can, that perhaps it's limitation on their own part, they can't do any better. Their background, their opportunities, their circumstances have stamped these impressions upon them, even as other circumstances have been stamped upon you. But when it comes time to being a little tolerant or a little patient with these people, we just don't seem to have the appropriate energy. It is much more easy to be irritated by them, or again, to develop fears as to what they may do to us. Having discovered a few of these problems within yourself, there's only one answer to any situation that isn't what it should be. It has to be corrected by a certain continuity of personal effort. There is no way of doing nothing and arriving safely where you belong. There must be some kind of steering of this situation. And as you study the situation, analyze this situation also. How big is your thinking? How real and deep are your emotions? Do you love anyone? Or have you gradually insulated yourself so that you have a certain compromised relationship with people? A relationship based upon utility or upon endurance or upon survival, but not upon real value. How carefully have you thought anything through? How carefully have you thought your own fears through? To what degree are you simply negative? And this negativeness having no light in it, no warmth actually in it, is simply gradually becoming a brittle, acid state of consciousness. If you find tendencies in this direction, then remember the 3 or 4 basic points that we brought out in the beginning. To be negative, you must cultivate negativity. You must live in it, you must have it around you, you must have it in you. If you once break this pattern anywhere, it will have a tendency to fall to pieces everywhere. Negativity means that you are gradually falling into an introversional condition. That your inner life, composed of its own negative imagination, is taking over. That your contacts with values around you are not adequate. That your interpretive power of events is not adequate. That you are spending too much time thinking and feeling about yourself. The answer is to get busy, to find various activities in which you have less time. It is far better to work all night than it is to lie in bed and be sorry for yourself all night. It is necessary for each individual to go to bed at night with a firm desire to wake up in the morning to do something important. There should be a feeling when you go to bed, this is a little rest so I can go on with what I want to do. If the individual wakes up every morning into a vacuum, he is certainly going to fill it with his own negation. If he has nothing more important to him than a little small circle of immediate comforts and pleasures, he will have reason for anxiety, because these comforts and pleasures can be assailed. They can disappear almost any moment. And if we have nothing else in life, we are building our faith and our hope upon things so fragile that we have right to any anxiety that may come into our minds. If we are utterly dependent upon a few convenient, familiar things for happiness, unhappiness will never be very far away from us. If only one person in the world can make us happy, we are tying our destiny to a creature that might disappear at any moment. We cannot afford to put all these eggs in such fragile baskets. So anxiety arises where we have pinned our eternal hope to a thing that is not eternal, but is exceedingly fragile and impermanent. If only passing fragile things can give us happiness, then we are always in the presence of the danger of immediate unhappiness. But if our happiness arises from depths, from values, and from principles, they are unchangeable. We can lose those things which we have, but we cannot lose those things which we are. And our values must always finally rest upon things which are eternal and not things which are immediately destructible. We may enjoy the things we have, and we may enjoy them more because of better value in ourselves. We may be grateful that we have them, but we must always remember the old line from the service, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. If we change the word Lord to law, we may come very close to a cosmic truth. So the things we have are passing, even as we are. But the principles within us either bind us to eternity with hope, or they bind us to this passing parade with fear. And our resolve must assist us to make these decisions. Keep busy. Keep the mind occupied with large thoughts. Keep contact with people. Learn to think of people not as problems, but as invitations to insight. Think of people as ways of learning about yourself. Think of people in the same charity that you think of yourself. Do not just blame. Try to understand. Try to recognize that if you were that person, you would probably do what he does. But you are not that person, and you never can be. But you can be slow to condemn and quick to applaud. You can find, therefore, out of the power to recognize value in others, a new sense of security against the anxiety in yourself. What we see in other people, they also feel. If we trust them, they will be more trustworthy. If we are understanding, they will try more to understand us. Henry Ford, who employed hundreds of thousands of men, learned this truth, that the best way to get the most from another person is to trust them. Occasionally you may be disappointed, but in the majority of cases you will not be. Ford at one time employed enormous numbers of ex-convicts. He took men out of prison and put them into the presence of the temptation that sent them there. He took embezzlers and put them in the cashier's department. He gave ex-bank robbers custodianship over the funds with the box and the key. And he said in one of his papers that he wrote on this subject that having worked with thousands of these men, almost all of them regarded as dishonest and dishonorable, that he had more reliable people from that group than from the honest group. These people had learned to appreciate someone believing in them. They had passed through an experience, but they had learned something, and he was able to prevent them from falling into the embitterment which comes when this learning has no chance to express itself. Because in normal society, very few people will forgive or forget. So he proved these things in action, that you can find better value and make something of it. If you are more concerned with helping things to grow than you are concerned in punishing them for differing from you, you'll have a different kind of life. Anxieties arise usually from the wrong basic attitudes. Then there are these anxieties which arise from blind fears. Wherever they exist, solve them immediately. If you fear your health problems, if you fear some economic problem, work with it immediately and solve it. Never allow it to drift, to become the basis of habitual anxiety. For anxiety becomes a habit, and this habit must be broken. And it is broken by removing its cause. Of course, if you are a good worrier, you will always find another cause to put in the place of the one you get rid of. And then if you for a moment have none, you will really be bewildered. But if at the same time that you are disposing of such worries as can be solved, if at the same time you are building values in belief, conviction, understanding, discrimination, and skill to support, your time appointments will be more full. There will be less time for worry. You will go to bed tired from the things you are doing and not merely from the attitudes you are holding. And when you go to bed only with the exhaustion of psychic pressure, you will not sleep well. So these things gradually smooth themselves out. Anxiety can be overcome so that it may occur really, legitimately, only a half a dozen times in a lifetime. There may be moments when it will occur. But this endless fretting and fussing and worrying about things of no importance in the first place can be corrected. And all the byproducts which affect those around us so adversely can be prevented. And if we can get to work on some of these principles, we will be better off. Time's up, time's up, time's up, time's up.